let's get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Andrea Davis. I am the International Programme Manager at the Civil Service College. Welcome to our weekly webinar series. I am joined by our expert trainer, Sophie Bryan, and my colleague, Christopher Ing, who is the Operations Director at the college. We will be both assisting Sophie throughout this talk today. So welcome to those who are brand new, who have not joined us before. And again, welcome back to our alumni and for those that do take part on a weekly basis. As you know, our webinar today is based on managing time at home during COVID-19. It should last around about 1 hour. Unfortunately, due to the platform that we're using, there won't be a participatory level today, so there will be no questions from the audience. If you do have any questions at all after or throughout, please do write them down and send us an email. We'll give you all of the details a little bit later on and how to contact us, but I'm sure Sophie would be happy to answer any questions. Okay, thank you very much, Chris. We'll go to the next slide. Okay, so who is the Civil Service College? Where are we based? What do we do? We are an independent training organisation that offers training solutions to the UK Civil Service and the wider public sector. We deliver training to not just central government departments, such as the Cabinet Office, DEFRA and DWP, but also devolved administrations like the Welsh Government and, of course, our NHS, as well as local authorities. Not only do we work in the UK, we work with governments right across the world as well. So you can see our international footprint here. So we do have delegations coming from places like India, right over to the Far East, who come and do their training in London. But not only that, we do fly out our trainers to your country as well. So if you do have any questions in relation to international training, please do get in touch with myself. Again, we'll give you our contact details at the very, very end of the presentation. Yeah, so next slide, please, Chris. Okie dokie. So our course categories. At the Civil Service, we do deliver over 70 different types of courses, ranging from accountability and governance to leadership and management, professional development, policy, law and legal, media, digital and data, and finance and commercial. Today's webinar is based under the professional development series. And again, if you want to find any information about today's webinar, as it's going to be a bite-sized chunk this morning, if you want to find out more, please do contact ourselves or Sophie. Sophie does deliver this type of training far and wide, so I'm sure she would be more than happy to discuss this training with you further. Thank you. So our services. We offer open courses, tailored and international courses as well. So our open courses, if you do go on our website, you'll see that we do this face-to-face in the classroom and, of course, now virtually, given the circumstances that we are all currently in at the moment. So we do actually deliver the webinars on a weekly basis, but if you want to do online training, virtual training, we have a new online package, which you can find more about that on our website. So we do offer those two types of open courses now, face-to-face and virtual. We offer tailored solutions as well. So depending on your company's training needs or individual training needs, we can tailor our training to meet your requirements as such. If you want to get in touch with us again to discuss that, we can design our courses to fit the needs for yourself. And as mentioned, obviously, we do work internationally, so we can fly our trainers to you and you can come to us as well. Thank you. Okay, so as mentioned, we are joined by Sophie Bryan, who is our expert trainer, and she's done various training for us in the past, both for international and UK clients. Sophie is also a founder and chief workplace culture specialist at Ordinarily Different Limited. She's also a previous director of HR and workplace culture with 17 years experience within her field. She now trains, coaches and advises on culture and transformation projects with clients from in-government organisations, NHS, charities and the private sector as well. Sophie's forte is radical organisational and personal effectiveness, and has spoken at many conferences, on podcasts and YouTube interviews, both here and the UK and US. Sophie is FCIPD qualified, HR professional and executive career and life coach, and action learning set coach as well. So Sophie, without further ado, would you like to take the stage, or the platform, should we say?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Andrea. And thank you, Andrea and Chris, for hosting me and supporting me today. I'm really hoping that the information I'm going to share with you all is really impactful, and you take some really good tools and tips away from the session. So let me start off then asking you all a question. I know you can't respond back to me, but I'd love for you to just think about this in your mind as we go through the session. What stops you from getting work done? So we're working from home at the moment. Our environment is completely different to what we're perhaps used to, where we're working in the office. Perhaps we have other people at home with us as well. I've just sent my daughter back to school for the first day in 6 months. Today she's gone back. So there's been a lot of transition around being a parent at home as well as working. So just take a moment before we actually deep dive into the session. What stops you from getting work done? Where does your time go, and where might you be less productive with your time? So have a think about that. Chris, what's the answer for you? What stops you from getting work done?
Well, I live by myself, so I can't say I'll be distracted by other family members. But in a way, because I live by myself, actually I've been more thinking about, okay, what about certain housework I need to figure out, or getting in touch with my parents. Most of the time, actually, it's actually overthinking the actual task. And it's just, I always think, oh, this is something that takes a lot of time, but maybe I will do something that's more simple first and then come back to it later on. But I realize when I come back to it, it's not that as complicated as I originally expected.
And I wonder how many of our attendees who are listening today might resonate with that as well. So as we go through the session, I'll pick up on that, Chris, because there might be a few people that are actually thinking, yeah, I'm the same. And actually, I resonate with that as well, Chris, which I'll share as we go through later in the session. So thank you for sharing that. Andrea, what about you? What stops you from getting work done? Where does your time tend to get logged?
Yeah, I think with Chris, he lives alone. I actually have a flatmate that I live with, who I've lived with for a few years now, and we get on so well with the best of friends. So it's actually really hard to separate that in at home, as opposed to in the office. You're working with your colleagues and you kind of get your head down, but at home we're both in a very confined type of area. So I guess it's living with your best friend. I guess that's probably a big distraction. But I think it's kind of getting into your work character as well. Procrastination, and it's Chris mentioned before, you'll see that you've got so many things to do at home, like housework and so on. It's hard to distract yourself from being at home and being the home, character, as opposed to the work character and getting into work mode. I think that's quite difficult. Yeah.
And I also think, picking up on your point there, when you've got someone at home who is a very close friend of yours. I mean, I've had my husband at home. He's been on furlough for 12 weeks, whilst I've also been working. I think there's a piece here around the typical traits of an introvert and the typical traits of an extrovert. So introverts typically would be enjoying this time working from home, where there's less of a distraction, there's less people in front of you turning up at your desk, the phone's ringing constantly, something's going on behind you, someone's having a loud conversation and you can't concentrate. So typically for introverts, this is a great time for them to be productive and to be at home. And extroverts typically, and I'm one myself, I struggle to motivate myself, and I will procrastinate because I need to be around people in order to feel energized and to concentrate. I need to have noise, I need to have conversation, I need to have connection in order for me to be productive. So again, for those of you that are listening, I think it's a good thing for you to think about actually which one of those two traits am I, because that also can affect how we use our time as well. And you might see that through as we go through the rest of the session. So, Chris, would you mind moving me on one more slide, please? Wonderful. So, what we're going to cover today then is the 5 main areas where we tend to waste our time, where we tend to be unproductive, where we tend to procrastinate. We're going to work through those 5 areas, and hopefully, when I asked you that question a minute ago, where did your time tend to go, you'll be able to relate to one, if not more, of these particular areas. So as we talk through them, I'm also going to share with you some tools and some tips on how you can work against that. It will help you be productive if you fit into one of those types of time wasting categories. And then I've also got a few little extra nuggets for you at the end, which don't necessarily fit into any of those categories, but I think are useful tools and tips for you to think about when being productive whilst working at home during this pandemic. So let's jump straight in then, and let's find out what the 5 areas actually are. So Chris, would you mind moving me on one more? Wonderful, thank you. So the first area is dislike. We can't relate to the task, we don't like the task. Perhaps it might be a cyclical task that you have to do every month or every week, and you kind of dread it. I know from my own personal experience, Andrea mentioned that in my past experience before I ran my own company, I was a HR director. And every 3 weeks, I had to produce a report that was taken to board about the workforce. And every 3 weeks, I would be like, oh, not this task again. So there was a real element for me that was dislike. I didn't really relate to it. It didn't play to my forte or my strengths. I'm very creative. So sitting at my laptop for a day and a half, just writing information, analysing data, just didn't play to who I actually am. So dislike is one area where we can drain our time. The second one is in terms of confidence. Perhaps we don't feel confident in the task we're being asked to do, or perhaps there's an area of we need to build our skill up in. So we're going to explore the things you can do if you feel like that's the space. I certainly know from myself, and perhaps you guys, perhaps Chris and Andrea, you can relate to this too. When you feel like you don't know enough about the task, or you're being asked to do something that's outside of your comfort zone, it can really affect your level of confidence and therefore affect your levels of procrastination as to whether you want to jump straight in and get excited about it, or you kind of drag your heels on it. So yeah, can you relate to that, guys?
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, in fact, we've been going on a journey to develop some e-learning modules recently, and for me, it's completely new. I mean, of course, we have a lot of experts who support us, but on a personal level, it's quite exciting, but at the same time quite nervous, because I need to learn a lot in a very short amount of time, and that makes me think, oh, it's actually a lot to learn. Maybe I do it when I have more time, but the daily tasks keep piling on, and that really affects my time management.
Yeah. How about you, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy enough just to kind of pick up the phone and speak to whoever I need to speak to and ask them questions, but it's not the same as just walking over at the desk and actually having that face-to-face conversation. And I think when you're at home, it's just building yourself up to send an email and, you know, ask 10 different questions in an email and wait for an email back and get a response, or give it someone a telephone call just to kind of clarify a few things. And it's just not as easy as to have that one-on-one face-to-face conversation. It kind of, it does dent your confidence a bit, I guess. Yeah,
absolutely. And I certainly feel the same way. Like I said just a minute ago, I need to be around people, and actually being around people, and I get my energy from being around people, which is, I guess, a fundamental difference between introverts and extroverts. If you imagine an introvert, they actually are very sociable people. They can be around people all day, but when they get home, they kind of have to go sit in a dark, quiet corner and like plug themselves in and recharge their batteries, because being around people all day has drained their batteries. Where being an extrovert, I'm actually sitting here before we was doing this webinar feeling, oh, my energy's quite low, it's just me on my own, who can I talk to? But now I'm talking to you, all my energy is starting to build up now, and actually you're charging me up by being on this call with me. So when it comes to then the confidence piece, again, the introversion and the extroversion piece can change depending on how you see your energy levels. So let's jump into number 3 then. So distractions. How easy is it when we're at home to just disappear down that rabbit hole? Your phone rings, a message comes through, the Amazon delivery driver arrives at the door. All these different things are happening in the home, which you wouldn't necessarily have access to if you're working in the workplace. So Andrea, you mentioned stuff like, you know, the dishwasher or the washing machine, or having your housemate at home with you. All these different things are added distractions. And I think we need to say at this point that it's completely natural that we are distracted by those things. I think it's completely natural that if we've got 5 minutes in between a phone call, that we might want to go and unload the dishwasher or grab a quick snack. I think it's completely natural, as we're working in our home environment, a space where we are comfortable, for us to feel that way. But when they get excessive, and certainly if that procrastination piece is coming in, then we really need to focus our attention on moving away from those distractions. And I'll give you some tools and tips on how you can do that. Number 4 is overwhelm. So Chris, I think this is kind of where you were going. The task seems so big. For some people, it may seem such a mammoth task, it's too big. And actually, it feels like you on your own are not able to complete this task. It's just, perhaps in some ways, you've made it more complex than what it actually needs to be. So as we talk through overwhelm, we'll break that down in understanding actually what does the task really consist of, and then we can be more succinct with the time we allocate to it. Does that resonate with you?
And I also feel like when I'm overwhelmed, especially when I was working at home, I feel like I have much longer time than when I was in the office. So I feel like I can take more time to maybe understand, but then I didn't really do it. I don't know whether being at home actually extended my actual working hours than it otherwise.
And I wonder how many of you listening feel the same way, because I've certainly seen with a lot of my clients that the working day has got longer with people being at home. Because if you imagine, let's take, for example, typically for us being based in London, we'll probably leave the office around 5:30 because we know we've got an hour's commute home, which means by the time we've got off the train, we've driven from the train station, we'll be home till 7. My daughter goes to bed at 8 o'clock, so I want time for her. So we have this cut-off time. We know we need to leave at this time because that's the part of our routine that then starts impacting on our home life. When we work from home, where does it stop? We haven't got the commute anymore. So there's an element of this, what I call the juggle struggle of work blending into our home life. And I think this is really important as we talk about this today, especially as you being civil servants, taking incredibly important roles and careers that you do. There has to be an element of self-care for you as well, and making sure that the job isn't so overwhelming, but also that you're allocating yourself time so you're not overwhelmed with your home life as well. So we'll explore some of that when we come to the points later on. And then finally, number 5, stuck. Can't solve it, it's too difficult. I would say this is similar to writer's block. And I'll share with you an example of where I had writer's block a few weeks ago on a deadline, delivering for a client, and the ideas weren't coming to me. I had no inspiration. I was looking at all these different resources, trying to find what I needed to find in order to kickstart a piece of work. And I'll share with you the tools and techniques that I then found in order to really kickstart that piece of work and actually then produce something that I was really surprised about what I actually did with it. So let's start drilling down then into what each of these look like and what the solutions are if you feel you fit into any of these categories. So would you mind moving me on, Chris? Lovely, thank you. So when we really dislike something, the dislike, like I said before about me writing a report, can often really override the necessity to get something done. So here I've given you 3 tools or 3 ways of thinking that can help you kind of kickstart your way into getting something done. If you think about you're walking down the street and you find a £5 note on the floor, £10 note on the floor. So you're walking down the street, you pick it up, you pop it in your pocket and you think, okay, I don't know who that belongs to. It's nice that I found £10. If you lost a £10 note and you've gone to pay for something, you're searching in your wallet or your purse, you can't find that, that's going to really stick with you all day. It's going to really aggravate you. Where's that £10 note gone? I can't believe how embarrassed I was in the shop. I couldn't pay for something. Chris, Andrea, have you ever had that feeling where you've lost something and it really, really gets you, really plays on your mind?
Yeah. All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
So when you lose something, it will psychologically hurts more than the reward of gaining something. The sensation we get when we gain something is quite quick. It's quite instantaneous. It's almost like it's I've received it. It's in my back pocket, and I'll go about the rest of my day. So the techniques here are actually focused on the punishment of not doing something. So let's talk about pawning it. So if you really dislike getting that report done, one of the things, and I'll talk about this when we come to distractions, is I like to use this little device as a method of distracting me, stopping me from doing it, or I'll find excuses as to, oh yeah, but I can't do that task yet because I need to do X, Y, and Z. So pawning it is, I would say to my husband, I'm going to give you my phone. And I do not want this phone back. I just realised I turned my torch on. Sorry if I blinded everybody on the screen. I do not want my phone back until I have completed this task. So it's a bit like if you were to walk into a pawn shop, you would give your item to somebody, they'd give you cash, and then you can only go and buy that item back if you've got the cash to do it. So you pawn it, give it to somebody else. So Andrea, you live with a flatmate. You could say to your flatmate, right, I've got to knuckle down, I've got this piece of work to do, I don't want to do it, but I've got a deadline by 5 o'clock. Please take my phone and under no circumstances give it back to me until I have completed this piece of work. So you're moving towards pain now. You're in a pain situation. You desperately want your phone back, so you're going to get it done, aren't you? Equally, you may not want your flatmate looking through your phone, so that's another. Make sure you get it back. So then we have give it. So it could be, actually, I'm not going to give my phone to you, but if I don't get this thing done, I'm going to give you something. So this is where you can hold yourself accountable. If you've got someone physical in your workspace, or Christopher, you live by yourself, you could do it virtually. You could have a conversation with someone virtually and say, no, if I don't get this thing done, I'm going to give you my X tickets, or I'm going to give you that sports shirt that I really love and cherish. If I don't get it done, then you can have that. And the thing is with dislike is it has to be something that will cause you significant pain not to have it in order to kickstart it. If there's 5 or 6 chocolate bars in the fridge and I just said to Chris, well, if I don't get it done, I can't have a chocolate bar this afternoon, it's not really a big deal because there's 5 others in the fridge. So it's something that is going to cause you some element of discomfort to not have that thing. And I promise it. This one, when I shared this before on another webinar, was the one that most people got excited about. And I'm really pleased, actually, we don't have a chat pane because I think it would go a little bit crazy if we did. So, think of a charity, think of a cause, think of a belief that you have that you are really strongly in opposition of. So, let's say, for example, I'll use my husband, who is an avid football fan. And there is one particular football team. Let's say, obviously for the UK's purposes, but I'll try and think of Manchester United. That's most people worldwide would have heard of Manchester United. Let's say that's my husband's most hated football team. Absolutely detests Manchester United. So, if I don't get this piece of work done, I am going to buy my flatmate Chris a Manchester United t-shirt. And he's going to parade it around, you know, every day at home. And it's going to really aggravate me that I have got to now see this one thing that I really detest. And it works so well with making a charitable donation to a charity that you don't agree with. You could say, okay, I don't agree with, it's difficult, isn't it, with charities? Well, I am a vegan. So the inclination for me would be to support animal charities, would be to support PETA. So perhaps I might choose to give money to a charity that I know, even though it's doing good in one area, is actually exploiting animals. And the punishment of that, the pain of me doing that, there is absolutely no way I would not get that task done. In my husband's situation, there's absolutely no way he could imagine spending £50 on a sports shirt for a team he detests and then giving it to Chris. So I know these sound like quite convoluted examples, but think about using pain or a punishment, some kind of discomfort that can motivate you into making. So
that's very interesting. Choose very interesting solution.
It is.
I mean, for me, I mean, let's say I do a monthly donation to guide dogs. I think very similar to you, Sophie. I'm more willing to support charities that looks after animal welfare. So I think for me to have to move my donation to another charity other than for animals, that's something that I'm really, really reluctant. That would definitely motivate me to avoid seeing that happening.
Yeah, good. Nandria, how about you?
I quite like the football t-shirt example. My father sprung to mind there with Newcastle versus Sunderland, and I just thought for a second there, you know, given that example, it would probably be along the lines of that, to be honest. Yeah, it's a difficult one though, isn't it? Because it's easy just to say, I'm not going to do it anymore. You know, I'm not going to move my money to a different charity. Or I'm not going to wear that football shirt or whatever it is. I feel like you'd have to sign some sort of contract to keep you promised with it. But yeah, that's an interesting approach to making sure that you get moved on, I guess. Yeah. So,
just to end on this one, this is the only slide where I talk about using punishment as a motivation. Discomfort. The rest of them are all positive. But as we've just explored using that analogy of losing money versus gaining money that doesn't really have an impact. It's the loss of something which does, which is why I wanted to share this one with you. But if dislike is not your thing, let's then move on to the second one then, which is confidence. So with confidence, we often procrastinate because we don't feel like we're perhaps good enough at the task, we're up to the task, we have enough knowledge about the task, and we can use not having enough knowledge to really easily procrastinate about getting the task done. So the first thing we need to do is think about how you can build the skill. So if you lose time here building your confidence, think about who could I speak to in order to help build that confidence. Do I have a coach or a mentor in the workplace who I can have a discussion with who might help me build that skill? Equally, negative self-talk is not going to help your confidence. Having a very dismissive or a lack of growth mindset around doing the task, it's just impossible, I don't have the skills to do it, I don't know why they've asked me to do this, I just don't know how this has landed on my desk, I don't feel comfortable doing it. that is not going to help you get the task done. So you need to reverse your positive self-talk and start talking to yourself in a way that will enable you to get the task done. And one of the ways you might find it helpful to do that is by being resourceful about how you're seeing approaching the task. So let's say, for example, time management is an issue for you, and you've contacted the Civil Service College and you're now joining this session today. So that's being resourceful. That's looking at where can I find the skills? Where can I find access to information to help me build that skill? And the Civil Service College, as Andrea outlined at the beginning, have got so many opportunities for you to do that. So explore that. Explore where in your organisation you might be able to find those resources. Perhaps your organisation has got some e-learning provisions that you can tap into. So think about how you can build that. And equally, start easy and take really small steps with it. So we'll talk about overwhelm in a moment, but if we think the task is this big, it's huge, then actually that's not going to build our confidence at all. We're going to see it so mammoth that actually we'll start using that negative talk to be quite defeatist about the situation. So start easy, start with the things actually you know that you are good at. Find the one thing that you think, actually, I could bring a bit of my strengths into this. I could bring a little bit of my knowledge into this to then start building from. So that's confidence. Let's move on to number 3. So number 3 is easily distracted, which I imagine if I was to ask you all to do a virtual hand up, most of you would probably hold your hand up here. Chris, Andrew, how about you? Are you holding your hands up to this one? Easily distracted.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Absolutely.
And it goes back to Andrea's point earlier around we're in the home. There are so many things to distract us in the home right now. So let's think about how we can create the most ideal environment for that. Now, working from home, depending on where you live, how your home is laid out, whether you are sharing your home with a family or you live on your own, will depend on where you choose to decide to work. Now, since lockdown, I have seen a whole manner of different arrangements over the camera, whether it be people working in a cupboard under the stairs, whether it be people sat on the sofa in their living room, I have seen someone else has been working in their garden shed. I've seen people working in their gardens. I've seen people sat at the dining room table, in the kitchen. So there is no one size fits all with this. But what I would say is make sure you have a dedicated space that's your workspace. And when work time has finished, you move away from that space into your home life. I think it's really important from a psychological perspective that we are delineating those spaces.
Sophie?
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, I just wonder whether you would recommend sticking to one location, or do you feel like if I work in the morning in one location and then afternoon move to a different location, do you think that would work, or would you see that as a distraction?
I think it's completely down to personal choice and circumstances. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all here. What I do think is important is that actually when we're working from home, we're living at work. It's not working from home. We're living in our workspace. So I think it's really important psychologically that you have a space that is my home space. I'm only doing home things in that home, and this is my workspace. So if you are sat on the sofa right now and that's where you tend to work, and then in the evenings you close your laptop down and that's now your home time, just think about whether there might be somewhere else you could go that you carve out and make your home space. You carve out and make your workspace. And that, if you created that ideal environment, you can almost shut the door and work, will help to create less distractions for you, because you can build that ethos of it being your workspace. So think about that. Car park your thoughts. So if there are things that are constantly distracting your mind, oh gosh, I need to do that next. And actually, this is one thing that I fall into, I'll be putting together a slide deck. I'll be in the moment thinking about the content. An email will then pop up and I'll go, oh, it's only going to take me 5 minutes to do that. I'm just going to quickly respond back to them. And then before I know it, actually, I've answered most of my emails and I've been distracted for half an hour. So have a notepad or some sticky notes by the side of your laptop, wherever you're working. And as these thoughts come up, park them on your notepad. Do not engage with them until you have finished the task you're doing. Write them down, then you've committed them to paper. You're not going to forget they're there, but park them. Then we've also got use distractions as an incentive. So going back to, as I was saying before, with the pawn it, give it or promise it, if I know my phone is a distraction, I'm going to give my phone away, I'm going to put it in a drawer, I'm going to lock it away, and I'm going to say to myself that once I have finished this, or once I've done an hour on this particular piece of work, then I can have that one thing that's the distraction. So, Chris, you and I were talking yesterday, and you said that food was your distraction. So,
yes.
Share with everybody the discussion that we had around that.
Yeah, I mean, and Andrea is laughing now because she knows how much I snack and eat in the office. Yeah, I mean, I get hungry.
This guy is constantly hungry. He's constantly hungry. I do get it.
But yeah, it's definitely a distraction because when I'm hungry, I can't really think about the task at hand. I always think, like, okay, what should I eat next? Or I look at the time. Okay, maybe it's nearly lunchtime. Maybe I can, what should I get next for lunch? But I can see, let's say I followed this methods of saying, okay, if I finish this in the next half an hour, I get to have a biscuit. I think it will work because it's more scheduled than it's at the moment. Sometimes it's quite impulsive, like, oh, I'll just grab. But then when I go and grab some snacks, it's actually take about 10 minutes off when I could have focused on a task at hand and get the flow going.
So this is where you can start using your rewards as an incentive. So for me personally, in my career outside of what I do, I'm a yoga teacher, and every day I need to stretch out. So I will use my yoga as my incentive. I will use my phone as my incentive. I will know that once I finish this webinar at 11:30, I can go and have a stretch. And I look forward to that, and therefore it drives me to get the work done in the time I've allocated for it. Mm-hmm. So think about writing a commitment to get something done, when and where. So I know, particularly if it's a piece of work that falls into section number 1, if I send Andrea an email and I say, yeah, no problem, Andrea, I will have the slide deck over to you by 5 o'clock on Thursday, I have to get it to Andrea by 5 o'clock on Thursday. So I've made a written commitment to get it done. I know when I'm going to have it done by, and I've told somebody. So Andrea is now holding me accountable to that. And Andrea, when I don't deliver it to you, you're going to be disappointed, right?
Mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I've now made a commitment to not be distracted. I have to get the work done. Okay, let's move on to number 4 then, which is overwhelm. So overwhelm can feel like something that perhaps is bigger than you. And there may be elements of the previous topics we've covered that come into this, such as you may feel overwhelmed because of a lack of confidence or a lack of knowledge. But when we're in a space of overwhelm, perhaps feeling a little bit stressed or perhaps even anxious about the task, I think the first thing to understand is, when is done done? When is the task complete? What does the finished task look like? Because quite often, I think most of us would hold our hands up to being perfectionists and want to add all these extra bells and whistles onto things, and we make things so much bigger than actually the bare bones of what needs to be done. So when you're feeling in a state of overwhelm, think about actually, what does the end look like? When will this task be completed? What is good enough? Then think about breaking it down into bite-sized chunks. Again, when I used to write reports, it used to feel like a mammoth task because it wasn't just me sitting there with all the information in my head writing away, I'd have to go to my HR team and get some data from them. I then had to sit there and analyse this data. I had to find a story for the data. I then had to find a way of communicating that in a report that made sense to said method. So instead of seeing it as this huge task, I broke them down into micro projects. And as I was breaking them down into micro projects, the first thing is gather data, the second one is analyse the data, and the third one is write about the data. I could then start being very specific about the tasks that need to be done and only doing those specific tasks, not adding any more complexity to it, just being very specific about what needs to be done under each of those chunks, and then setting micro deadlines. So I know I have a report to write and I have 3 weeks to write it. Oh my gosh, that's not a lot of time. How am I going to get it done by this particular deadline? Well, if you've broken it down into bite-sized chunks and you've been specific, now then go back and add micro deadlines to each of those project areas. So I need to get the data from my HR team by Thursday, which means then I can then get all the analysis done by Tuesday, which means I can then write the report by Friday. So instead of having this one big deadline looming, set them down into smaller bite-sized chunks and smaller deadlines. Again, it might be useful to have an accountability partner. So tell somebody, you need that data by, or can I have that conversation with you by, or I can send you my part of this by. And then if things are really becoming too overwhelming, take some time out. You cannot work in overwhelm when you have a frazzled brain, when your brain just won't engage. So take some time out, do something different, go for a walk, have something to eat if you're Chris. If you're Andrea, go and have a chat with your flatmate. Do something that gets you away from that for the moment so you can reset your brain and come back with a fresh pair of eyes and a slightly more focused way of thinking. Go on, Chris.
Yeah, so I think for me, it does resonate with me a lot. But I think the challenge I often face is, let's say when I have to put it into bite-sized chunks, is I sometimes underestimate the time that's required or overestimate. Before I jump to any task, I like to sit down and think through. And sometimes I notice that I think too much and too long. And I don't know when do I stop that thinking and move into that action stage.
So that's where I think you need to be specific. So under each of those project areas, if you bullet point, what is the necessity? This is not you're creating something, absolutely fantastic and you're going to put your whole heart and soul into it, because you're not feeling like that right now. You're in overwhelm. So be very specific about what is the absolute bare minimum that needs to be done in this task. And that actually might then help you see it as a smaller task than what it is. It might help you see it as a bigger task than what it is. But wouldn't you rather know that now up front so you can plan for that than get surprises further down the line? So I think that being very specific about things, what are the absolute essentials? And if the list looks too big, go back and re-edit it and say, right, what in here doesn't need to be done by me? Or who could I delegate to? Who could I ask for help for, so that these little bullet points under these blocks don't seem so overwhelming? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so let's move on to the 5th and final one. And then I'll give you a few little other hints and tips. And then we'll go to a Q&A. So, 5th one is stuck. So this was me talking about writer's block. So I had a piece of work to do for one of my clients, which was rewriting some of their policies. And they wanted them done, this is what I'm known for in my business, in a fun, creative, engaging way. So I'm sat here with a blank Word document, the original policy, and I have no idea. Nothing was coming to me. Nothing was standing out for me, thinking, let's use what I've done before and I'll tweak it, or I've seen this done really well. The piece of work I was being asked to do was completely unique. There was nothing I could draw upon. So number one, I mixed it up. I got away from my computer screen and I started using flip chart paper. I had post-it notes out. I was actually physically writing. How often when we're in this space of stuck, or our time is being drained because we're stuck, do we actually pick up one of these and a bit of paper and just write? So mix up the medium that you're using, and that was really effective for me, and it's really effective for your brain as well to move you out of that stuck position into something more engaging. If you're really stuck, walk away from it. Give your brain a rest, like I was saying in Overwhelm. Give your brain a chance to reset itself. Go get a drink, go get some fresh air, go do some exercise, and then come back to it. Equally, if you're really stuck, you can start to feel quite negative about the fact you haven't made progress, that you're wasting time. I was feeling really frustrated that I must have spent about 2-3 hours looking at this blank Word document, looking at the original, and nothing was coming to me. I think you've wasted 3 hours, Sophie. So create a to-do list. Start writing down the things that you think need to be done. And as you're writing it, you might find that some inspiration starts to come up on how you need to approach the task. Equally, give yourself some credit for the things you have already done. So when I wrote that to-do list, I wrote down that I had already had a discussion with the HR director. I had already spoken to 60 members of the HR team. I had already read the policy. I had already taken notes on the policy. So actually, there was 4 things I've done already that made me productive in achieving this task. That then moves you into a space of feeling more productive. You're not being negative with yourself about your time because you've come from a space of information or knowledge. Let me share one other thing with you about stuck, and I wonder whether this resonates with you as you're listening, but Chris and Andrea, let me know if this resonates with you as well. So if we move on to the next slide, one of the biggest things that come up with being stuck is that we chase perfectionism, and we are so focused on being perfect that we don't produce anything. So this is a mantra for you to think about: production over perfection. It is better to produce something that, you know, does what it says on the tin, gets the job done, than waste your time producing nothing or something that is substandard because you've been chasing perfectionism. So does that resonate with either of you?
Absolutely.
It's just the idea of failing. No one wants to fail. Especially if you're doing a piece of work for your team, well, with your team, or say, for instance, your manager, it's that idea of failing them as well, before you've even tried. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think because we're so driven by perfection, that is where a lot of our time drains go. Because we're like, oh, I've got to just add this extra bit, and I just need to re-edit this, or I can't do this until everything else is perfect, then I can move on to that. If you think just about a production perspective, how do I need to get this piece of work done? What are the core essentials? Then actually you can remove yourself from some of that stuckness and start getting things done. So remember, production before perfection. So 2 really other quick tools and tips for you, and then I'll hand back over to Chris and Andrea for your Q&A. If emails are a problem for you in terms of draining your time, in terms of distractions, I imagine working from home, your inbox has never been so big because you don't have that face-to-face contact with people anymore. Here's a little tool or tip for you to think about. I use the 3-2-1-0 methodology, and that is finding 3 times a day to check my emails. And I write those times down. Sometimes I put them in my calendar, and I only check my emails on those 3 occasions. Now, there are caveats to this, of course. If you're expecting a really important email, or perhaps you work in customer service and your emails tend to be your work for the day and you need to be responding by email continuously, then of course this may need to be slightly different for you. But for everybody else, check your emails 3 times a day. And if 3 doesn't work, check it 4 times a day or twice a day. But find a number that is useful for you and commit to that, and put it in your diary, diarise it. That's the time you're going to check your emails. Spend 21 minutes in your inbox. So actually, if you think you're doing it 3 times a day, that's an hour you're spending in your emails. So 21 minutes. Now, 21 minutes is not actioning everything that's in your inbox. It's going in, it's reading it, and it's making a to-do list of the actions you then need to do. But spend 21 minutes actually in the email, and then start devising your to-do list from there. And then 0 is file those emails away, clear your inbox. I started off at the beginning of lockdown with 10,000 emails in my inbox. All of them, most of them, had been read or they were flagged up for certain reasons, but there was 10,000 in there. That in itself is overwhelming. So I've now reduced that down to about 7,000. And as I'm now responding back to emails, I am filing them away. That reduces the sense of overwhelm and also makes you feel like you're more in control of your time and you're not being demanded. You know, your emails aren't controlling your time. Okay, then my final tip for you is to think about, when are you actually at your most productive? So Chris, if you would mind moving me on one more. This is my final parting thought for you on time management. So we have the gift of working from home right now. So to a certain extent, we can define our own schedule. If you are an early bird, you like being up, active early in the morning, then perhaps those tasks that are going to drain your energy the most, those tasks that make you feel overwhelmed, dislike, you're full of distractions when it comes to them, you perhaps don't feel confident with them, all of those 5 things we discussed before, choose those tasks to do at the time when you're at your most productive. So if the morning is most productive for you, schedule your day around doing those things first. If, however, you are more productive in the evenings, and this is myself, I can get a piece of work done when it's dark, it's quiet, there's nobody else around me, people generally aren't sending me emails or ringing me at that time. That's when I'm most productive. That is when I will then save the more laborious tasks, the more energy use type tasks for that time of the day. So have a think about where that might sit for you. So to close off the session then, I would just like you to think about and write down, and Chris, if you would mind moving me on to my last slide, wonderful. What is the one thing that you are going to take away from today's session? What's the one thing that has been really useful for you that you can log off of this webinar and you can put into action straight away? So those of you that are listening, if you've got a pen and paper to hand, write it down. Make that commitment to yourself now, that one thing that you're going to take away. Chris, Andrea, let's have some feedback from you. What's the one thing that you're going to take away from today's session?
Be specific. I think I agree with what you said earlier. I think most of the time when I can't accurately estimate the time required to do the job, is maybe the steps, the tasks that I need to do is not specific enough. And I really like that production over perfectionism. I'm the type who really like to think what would be the ideal products, service, the way to write the report. But that takes so much time that I leave very little time to do the actual production. So I will bear that in mind.
Good, wonderful. Andrea, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think it's the write it down solution. If something comes in your head, if you've got an idea, if you've got a question, write it down, park it to one side, whatever it is, if it's a notepad or a sticky note, park it to one side, continue with what you're doing, and then at least you've got something to refer back to a little bit later on when you've got a little bit more time. Because I'm very much one of those right here, right now type of people. If I've got something that pops in my head, I'll turn around to Chris and I'll ask the question, or I'll pick up the phone. Where really I don't have to do that. If it's not massively important, I don't need to put it at the top of my prioritization list. I can just leave it to one side and then carry on with my work. So I think that's one thing I'll definitely, you know, continue to do.
And of course, with what you've just said there, is it's a distraction for you, but it's also a distraction for Chris as well.
Yeah.
So by parking it for a time when you're more able to deal with it, is actually, you know, it's only causing a distraction from one perspective in terms of you talking to Chris, but actually Chris might be in a better space to support you once you've parked it as well. So that's wonderful. I'm really pleased that you've taken something away from that. And for everybody watching and listening to this, I hope in fact there's more than one thing, but I hope when you come off of this session, you can start putting one of those things directly into action. So that's all from me. I believe we've got a Q&A now. So, and Chris, have you got, in kind of the last couple of minutes, have you got any questions that you would like to ask me on this topic?
I do, Sophie. For me, it's just reflecting back on what you said about getting stuck. I often get stuck on whatever I work on, and I find really useful to ring my colleagues to ask them, oh, what do you think about this? I think this is down to the fact that me and my team are really close. Like Andrea said earlier, when she got a question, she would just ask me straight away. But it reminded me of my friend who works in the civil service, and he's been assigned to work on some of the COVID-19 related tasks. So he's been put with teams that he doesn't know, and because it's such a fast-paced and actually quite short-term task force, there's no room for them to build up that team cohesion. So he feels he's always alone. How would you recommend the person in that situation to, in a way, being alone and can't get no help and stuck? What kind of avenue would you recommend to this person?
So I think right now we have probably created greater connections virtually than we have ever done before. So if in his workplace he's not getting those connections, then perhaps he could look external to that, Chris. So there are some really great communities on LinkedIn that he could tap into to build that network. Equally, he could start talking to people in similar roles in other parts of the civil service. And if he wants to start building that network within his workplace, then there's nothing to stop him from instigating a team catch-up, for example. He could say, okay, everyone, I know, it'd be really great for us all to have a conversation around what's going on X, Y, and Z. How about we all jump on Zoom at 10 o'clock this afternoon, 10 o'clock this morning, to talk about those things. But I also find, and I don't know whether many of the listeners have found this as well, that because we're isolated, we're working from home, we are really missing out on a sense of fun and camaraderie we have in the office. So you could also turn a team meeting into something like organising a team quiz. It could be something sociable. It could be, I've been doing something with one of my clients, which is around skill sharing. And once every week, somebody will jump on Zoom and will share a skill with somebody. So if he's feeling like there's a lack of connection, he can either take responsibility for that himself and start instigating something with his team, because actually, you never know, they're not necessarily doing these things because they don't want to. It might just be nobody's come up with the idea, nobody's put the suggestion forward. So I'd recommend that, and equally, I think he could look external to networks outside the organisation that might also be useful to him. And of course, Civil Service College. Tap into yourselves as well. There's some great connections you could help make for people that are in different types of organisations. And even just being on a training course with other people, you start making connections too. So, yeah, I think there's a lot you could do around that, Chris. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yes, thank you, Sophie.
You're welcome. Andrea, did you have a question for me?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to Chris's, but just on the back of what he's just been talking about. What advice would you give to someone who, for instance, is managing a small team, and they're managing their own time, but they're managing a team that massively struggles with their own team management? And obviously, given the fact that a lot of us are now working from home, I mean, we're back in the office now, but a lot of people are working from home. Having to do that virtually as well, you're not seeing that person face to face. What advice would you give that person?
Okay, So rule 101 with this, and this is the do not do, because it's so easy to fall into this trap, is to start asking people to log their time. Is to start saying to people, you know, I want to see that you're online at 9 in the morning, and I want to see that you're visible at 5 o'clock in the evening, and start checking. Now, if there is a capability issue and there's a real genuine performance concern, then that's a different discussion. But people that are working at home right now, and like I've just said, actually, it feels like we're living in our workplace right now. We're all adapting. We all have very different fears and anxieties around what COVID-19 is presenting for us. And equally, we have cultural differences in our own homes as well. So to start saying to people, I don't trust you, I need to know how you're working, I need to know you, just really isn't going to create a great feeling. So that's the absolute don't do. What I believe you should do is you should get your whole team together on a Zoom call, on a Skype call, on a Teams call, whatever software it is you use. And I think you need to talk about team planning and time management and have an open dialogue with people around, where are you struggling? Where do you need help? What are the things that I can do for you to support you as a manager? There may be some members of the team who might say, actually, I could really do with a daily check-in with you. Fine. As a manager, you offer that daily check-in with that individual. There might be someone else who is just doesn't want to be contacted at all. They're just flying, they're in their own bubble, and they're getting things done, who doesn't need that contact. But actually, what they do need is a sense of team. So perhaps that person might say, well, I'm fine on a daily basis, but perhaps we could have a regular catch-up every week all together. So I think it's very bespoke to the individual and our own personal home circumstances, because also thinking back to before school started today, I was also homeschooling my daughter at the same time. So we have a juggle struggle going on here. And unless we articulate that to our employer and say, oh, you know, I am struggling with my time right now, I'm not really, because I've got a 7-year-old at home, or I've got a new baby at home, or I've got a child who isn't independent, a 2-year-old toddler at home who I can't just leave, then the discussions need to be very bespoke around that. And there's plenty of solutions for that. It could be that you work later, it could be you work earlier, it could be that you reduce your working day down to 4 days a week or 3 days a week and you use holiday. So there's lots of different ways, but until you have the discussion with each individual, I don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all with that way of working. Not currently how we're experiencing this, I don't believe. Does that make sense?
Sorry, what were you saying there?
Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I hope that question and what Chris was talking about earlier was very relatable to our viewers as well. And again, I mean, everything that Sophie's went through, I feel, you know, that it is relatable, especially with the situation that we're in right now. And unfortunately, obviously, we couldn't get our participants to ask any questions today. However, if there is anything that you want to question Sophie on, if there's anything that you feel like, you know, you need to get off your chest and just get a little bit of advice, I'm sure Sophie will be happy to answer any questions via email. So if we just move on to the next slide, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Great, and I'll talk about how you can actually contact us in a second to ask those questions. But if you want to find out more about our weekly webinars, if you want to keep up to date with what we're delivering each week on a Thursday, please do sign up to our training alerts on www.civilservicecollege.org.uk. And we do deliver different topics every 1 to 2 weeks on the Thursdays. Please do sign up to our alerts and find out more. We just put the next slide. Thank you. And again, with what I've just mentioned about contacting myself or, you know, Sophie, we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, we're on Twitter, LinkedIn, and this recorded webinar will be put on our YouTube channel, so you can share this with your contacts, friends, colleagues, and so on. This is also our social media handle, which is on the screen there, so you can search for us by putting that in on the social media platforms. Again, if you need to contact us, my email address is andrea@civilservicecollege.org.uk. For any questions that you want to ask, please feel free and we'll forward those on to Sophie. Sophie, thank you so much for taking part in this week's webinar. That was absolutely fantastic. And again, I hope our participants were able to take something away from that this morning. It's been a joy having you here, and thank you for your time. Thank you, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.